we made it home yesterday after a long day of driving back down from Oklahoma. And now that we're getting ready to put everything away, we figured, Lauren and I figured we'd do a little video and talk about the things that worked well, things that we didn't really need, and things that we wish we would have had. So just kind of starting out on the outside of the vehicle, the roof rack, it's from Easyon at equipped1.com. This was a great rack. It worked really well. It's got lots of grooves where you can put bolts in and customize it. So up front we put these little rings on here that we could route our ratchet straps and hold whatever we wanted. And of course it made it where we could put the tent exactly where we wanted it on the roof. We weren't constrained based on the factory rails. So yeah, I love the rack. It was a good investment. The tent itself from 23-0 worked out really well. I'd say there's a couple minor things that were a little annoying, but overall it was a good investment. And it's kind of going to be piece part on how we do this based on how we open things up and dry things out today and put things away. But on the tent itself, it's got this cover to keep it dry and to keep it low profile when you're driving down the highway. It's got these nice little Velcro straps to kind of tension the last bit. Of course, you run a zipper around the bottom to keep everything on. But these 4 straps that also keep the top part from kind of billowing in the wind as you're driving down the highway, they're kind of tough to do. And it's because the Velcro, you have to feed it through this right here, these 2 loops. So when you throw this strap over, you get this, and you try to bring this down, you have to feed this other fat Velcro part through. And right now it looks sort of easy, but that's because I've already tensioned it down. But when it hasn't been tensioned, when the tent is still kind of a little bit fat because I left some sleeping bags in there, you have to kind of compress it using these straps. And so getting that Velcro through there is a little tough. I don't know if there's a way to maybe make this a little bit less Velcro. Maybe I could cut off a little portion of that. Once you get it fed through there, it's not so bad. Let's see, so this is the annex, and I'll show you a little bit later, I guess, what the annex looks like when it's hooked up, or at least I'll put a picture in there. But when it's all packed up in a bag, it could go inside easily, but we wanted to keep the back sort of low profile so I can still see out the rear view mirror. And this was a great spot to ratchet it down. Just use one ratchet strap and then these eyelets that you can put anywhere on the rack. So the other thing we had up on the roof rack, I'll show you what it looks like without the bag there in place. You can see those eyelets for tying things down, how you can position those wherever you want. In that spot, it's already empty because I took it down last night. We had our cooler. We just had one cooler. We bought this Igloo. We didn't want to go all out and pay for a Yeti or Arctic just yet. We wanted to kind of see how we could do with this Igloo. It worked great. I mean, there's a couple minor things that we didn't really use the wheels, but I could see how that'd be nice when we go to the zoo. And it's got, of course, a handle for pulling it along. Got a nice bug collection from the front face when we were driving. Because it has the wheels, though, the bottom is not flat. That was a little bit of a nuisance, but it didn't really cause a big deal. And we ended up using dry ice for this trip, so we bought, I forget how much, but I put the dry ice down in there. It covered this whole bottom area up to about here, and I taped this little piece of plastic. It was a divider in the 4Runner to cover up that's where there's a little pass through for leakage. And so we had to leave that open because dry ice, you can't seal it up completely, or as the dry ice sublimates, If you've got that sealed up and if you have the lid sealed up, then you'll build up pressure and it'll blow the top. Something will blow up. So obviously we didn't want that. We didn't want an uncontrolled explosion up on the roof. So I set this up so that there was no direct pass through. It just kind of covered it up, but it still allowed for vapor to seep through. And then we put a piece of cardboard covered in plastic on top of the ice, and then a towel, and that way the food didn't touch the dry ice directly. And the one thing I learned is that positioning things in there is critical. So things that you want to stay frozen, put them directly on the dry ice. Things like milk that you don't want to freeze, put them up as high as possible. We had a milk container that, because it was kind of tall and slender, the bottom part of it was down by the ice just to fit. We didn't want it tipping over, but because we did that, the milk froze, which wasn't the end of the world. It just made it hard to get some milk out for the baby. Anyway, in hindsight, I might consider getting 2 coolers that are smaller, having one with dry ice for frozen stuff, and getting another one with just regular ice for chilled stuff. All right, so just taking a peek inside the cabin. We did a couple small modifications on the inside. It's not even really worth mentioning, but there's these organizers. I think they're by Salex, S-A-L-E-X. That was pretty nice for the glove box. There's another one here in this compartment. It's kind of hard to see, but it just helps give you more compartments, and I think that was worth the purchase. I got a RAM mount, and I got a mount for the camera that I'm using right now to film this, and this was surprisingly easy to install. I was really worried. I didn't want to tear the dash apart, especially the night before the trip, but that's just when I got the parts, just because I ordered them too late. And I was really worried because tearing the dash apart, I'm always afraid I'm going to break some piece of plastic. But it turns out there's a really good video on YouTube if you search for it. This part here, you just pinch it and pull it out, and it actually comes out pretty easily. And then there's 4 bolts in here. I think they're Phillips head. You remove those, and then you grab this part. And again, it's a friction fit, but Toyota did a good job making those plastic clips where they're not wimpy ones that break the first time you pull on them. And so once you have access to the backside, I disconnected at least one of the little cables just so it wouldn't put tension on the electronics. But then I had access to where I could drill a little hole, put a bolt through, and attach this RAM mount. The RAM mount worked pretty good for my phone. I guess I got one that was too small, like it could just barely fit my 6P. Let me see if I can zoom this in. So Nexus 6P, this one, when you squeeze these, it just barely fits in there. It does a good job. It's just I don't know, I feel like I shouldn't have to squeeze these quite so hard just to get my phone in there, so I might consider getting the next size up. So even though the dimensions on the website said that my phone would fit, consider if you have a larger phone, maybe getting the bigger one just so it's not as difficult to get in there. The one thing we ran into with the RAM mount is that I didn't torque the bolt down super tight because I wasn't sure how much this plastic could take, and I sure didn't want to break it the night before our trip. So I put a lock washer in there. I didn't use a zip nut, just because a nylock nut, because I just wasn't 100% sure this was going to be the final solution. I'll probably go ahead and use that now, the nylock nut, but I might see if I can get a rubber washer or something, just because as we were on some really bumpy roads, this thing, it didn't just bounce, it ended up doing this, where it kept falling down, and I had to push it back up, and that's because the bolt just isn't tight enough, and it just kept slipping down to here until something contacted the dash. It's just a minor nuisance, but you know, when you're trying to look at your maps and follow the trail and be safe on the side of the mountain, it is a distraction. And then We got this mount for the camera. So this is for the Canon video camera that I'm using right now. And it's just one of the many options you can buy for a tripod head. So again, I drilled a hole through the base and I screwed that in. It's actually on the other side there is a nut, a lock washer and a nut. And then this is the base that actually you screw into the bottom of the camera. And then the whole thing, let's see, I think it goes like that. And then you twist this knob. And it's kind of nice that it's got a little level. So I used that when we were parking for the night, just to see if we were level. But one kind of downside to this system is that the camera has to face either directly forward or directly aft. Also, just because I'm a dummy, when I bought the camera, I bought this Manfrotto tripod, and it uses a round adapter. I didn't even consider that there'd be all these different kinds of adapters, and of course there are. So this one's a round, and then that one's a square. So I'm gonna look and see if I can get a round one to mount on the dash. I talked to some people at B&H.com. They said that the square ones were more secure, but that one was pretty rock solid. The only time it came loose was on a really bumpy trail that we were going fast on, and the mount on the bottom of the camera actually came a little loose, and so I had to keep twisting it to straighten it. But because that one uses a Phillips head, it's not like it's something I could do while I was driving, whereas the one for this tripod here, I can actually just take it off right now. It's just this little thumb screw. So that would have been easier to adjust. I guess my wife could have done it while I was driving. So I don't know, I'm going to try to figure out which one I like best. I might just get a different tripod, but with the round one, I figure I could aim it backwards at any of us while we're driving at any angle to give us a little bit more flexibility. Okay, from the driver's side of the vehicle, there's one other thing to show outside. There's one other thing to show on the aft too. I'll get to that in a second. But the shovel I thought was important for two reasons. One was that we knew we were going to be burying some waste when we were out away from any campsites that had porta potties or whatever, outhouses. So we had a Home Depot bucket and a seat, and we had some biodegradable bags and paper and gel and whatnot. So we needed a shovel to bury that stuff, get it down in the ground. Also, just because of the forest fires, there were at least a couple forest fires south of where we were in Colorado, and so even though we weren't doing any campfires, we were cooking with a camp stove. And then just in general, I just thought it'd be good to have a shovel just in case there were any issues. So again, this is from Easy On for the K9 rack. This one, let's see. I forgot my keys. Let me get the keys. All right, got my key. So bought some padlocks just so that on the nights that we were in town, the little hood rats wouldn't try to steal our stuff. So this is really simple, but a nice design. Loosen that up, it pops up here. This whole part rotates down, and then here comes the shovel. Now I was a little bit worried. My wife picked out a shovel without having this clamp available, and she just picked one that was cheap but would look like it would do the job, and she got a perfect one. I mean, it's great. But when we first put it in here, I put it like that, and I thought, oh crap, it's not going to be able to close far enough. So there's just one position that works for this particular shovel. Of course, if you had a smaller handle shovel, then that wouldn't be an issue. But if I get it in here just right, then I close that up, I pull down the tensioner, get it kind of thumb tight, And then this is in there tight enough that I can lock it up and keep people from messing with it. Let's move around here to the back. So one more thing up on top I wanted to show that's pretty cool is, again, this is from Easy On. This is their camp table. So there's a little slider here that blocks it from coming out while you're flying down the roads or bumping around on the trail. Real simple but effective design there. And then the table just comes out, it just slides out like this. And so let's see the table. There you go, there's the underside of the table. It's just got a little strap to keep the legs from flopping down while you're loading it, and then the legs fold out, and it's got the little things in the corners to keep the legs from collapsing. Nothing too fancy there, just an aluminum table. It was really handy when we were out in the middle of nowhere that didn't have any good surfaces for the camp stove and that kind of stuff. And then one thing I want to share, sorry for the video production here, but let's see if I can get this. So right there, I used to have my shark fin XM radio or satellite radio, whatever it's called, antenna. And when I was going to put in the table, I thought, oh, that's going to interfere. This is going to be a problem. But I found some instructions on the Forerunner forums, and it turns out, depending on the model year, that fin doesn't serve any purpose. It's just an empty cavity, which blows me away that they would waste space. I guess people just think it looks cool. I don't know. To me, that's just dumb. So really, it's just this circuit board with a couple chips on it. I'm assuming at least one of those chips is the satellite radio or antenna. And so you had to pop the ceiling panel off inside to get access to the bolt. But then I coated this in some liquid electric tape just to seal it up from the rain and whatnot. I used some silicone underneath it. I just jammed a bunch in there and then tightened it down. And it's been watertight for at least 6 months now. So I may have to put some more coats of that liquid electric tape or find some other longer term solution to protect it. But then again, I don't use the satellite radio, so who cares? I also noticed that some people thought you were restricted to the medium table based on the just the size of the rack on the Forerunner. But I talked with Paul May, and I confirmed that the distance between the rails and these little feet that hold the rack to the Forerunner, that there was just enough room to do the large. And I've got a thread on the Forerunner forums that goes into detail on that. So you can get the large table. It will work. Another thing to watch out for, let me just move this over out of the way and open up the gate, is, see if I can get this. So that little slider that keeps the table from sliding out, see how close it is? It almost contacts that wind deflector on the gate. There's just enough clearance in there. So it all works. Just keep that in mind. This also comes into play when you're positioning your tent. I was tempted to move it all the way aft, but then when you have it deployed, there's these little metal rods that stick out to hold the windows open, so that becomes a factor.